Welcome back. Reading The Art of Power. Uh, really good book about Thomas Jefferson. We're on page 10. In 1752, the Jeffersons moved back to Shadwell. 5 years later, in 1757, Peter Jefferson died. The father was 49. So Thomas Jefferson's dad died when he was 49. Wow. And Thomas, 14, was propelled into the role, if not the reality, of man of the house. He did not recall the sudden transition fondly. At 14 years of age, the whole care and direction of myself was thrown on myself entirely, without a relative or friend qualified to advise me or guide me. I know how that feels. He later wrote to a grandson. There would be no more evenings spent in the first floor study, looking over maps, listening to tales of brave expeditions, tinkering with the tools of surveying, discussing Shakespeare or the Spectator. Those hours with his father were now to live only in memory, with the image of Peter Jefferson before him, inspiring and daunting. Man, being 14, losing your dad. And his dad was a good dad. Shadwell was to be dominated by Thomas's mother, Jane Randolph. Okay, I gotta remember her name is Jane. Jefferson, who almost certainly exerted a great influence on her eldest son, as the legend of Peter Jefferson did, but in subtler ways. To all appearances, Jane ran things as she saw fit. Literate, social, fond of cultivated things, from fancy plate and crockery to well-made furniture to fine clothing. She was to endure the death of a husband, cope with the deaths of children, and remain in control to the end, immersed in the universe around her and in the lives of those she loved. Man, you think being a woman now is hard? Well, it is, but imagine like in those days when like your man died and like you literally have to like pull everything up yourself. It must have been a little bit more easier though, because if you think about it, she had slaves. So she doesn't have to do the hard labor, but she has to manage, right? It's scary. You can survive with a homestead, right? Much better than if you were like a single mom in the projects in the Bronx, right? That her eldest son grew up to become just such an unflinching, resilient aristocrat is no surprise. Jefferson's bravery in the face of domestic tragedy and his determination to have his own way on his own land among his own people could owe something to the example of a mother from whom he learned much about negotiating the storms of life. Negotiating the storms of life. That's a cool way to put it. In the death of her husband, Jane Jefferson became both mistress and master at Shadwell. At the age of 37, she was the mother of 8 surviving children. Oh, that's cool. She had a lot of babies. The oldest, Jane, was 17. Thomas was 14. The youngest were 2-year-old twins. Twins. Her great-great-granddaughter later reported a family tradition that Miss Jefferson was a woman of clear and strong understanding. She would have to have been in order to manage her children and the complexities of Shadwell. With its 66 slaves and at least 2,750 acres, which included the 1,000-acre tract that became Monticello, 66 slaves. Wow, over 2,000 acres. Oh, the space sounds like heaven. Man. Wow. From the family Bible that survived from Shadwell, Jane Jefferson emerges as a meticulous record-keeper, a habit her son inherited. There was death and fire and family tragedy. One of Jane's 8 children, Thomas's sister Elizabeth, appears to have been disabled. The most fortunate of us all in our journey through life frequently meet with calamities and misfortunes, which may greatly afflict us. Jefferson once wrote, and to fortify our minds against the attacks of these calamities and misfortunes should be one of the principal studies and endeavors of our lives. Yeah, fortifying our minds against misfortunes and the struggles of life, right? As a woman wielding authority over her family, her hired laborers, and her slaves, Miss Jefferson probably developed a fine tactical sense. She was an agreeable, intelligent woman, as well as educated as the other Virginia ladies of the day, of her own elevated rank in society. Wow, becoming a widow in your 30s. And she was a notable housekeeper, wrote a great-granddaughter. She possessed a most amiable and affectionate disposition, a lively, cheerful temper, and a great fund of humor. Yeah, humor is definitely needed. She was fond of writing, particularly letters, and wrote readily and well. Jane Jefferson came from a family that did not doubt its place, and her husband had often been away when he was alive, leaving her to run things in his absence at both Tuckahoe and Shadwell. That Jane Jefferson was determined woman can be further deduced from the fact that she rebuilt Shadwell after it burned in 1770, rather than moving it. It was her world in the way Monticello became her son's, and she sought to arrange reality as she wanted it to be. Oh, that sounds nice. In an autobiographical sketch he began when he was 77, Jefferson talked of his mother only in relation to his father. Of Peter Jefferson, Thomas wrote, "He was born February 29th, 1708, and intermarried 1739 with Jane Randolph, of the age of 19, daughter of Isham Randolph, one of the 7 sons of that name and family settled at Dungeness in Goochland." Goochland, that's a funny name. After describing his father's surveying and map-making, Thomas wrote, "He died August 17th, 1757, leaving my mother a widow who lived till 1776, with 6 daughters and 2 sons, myself the elder." Wow, she died in the very auspicious year, 1776. It's a very important year in American history. Except for a brief mention in a letter to a Randolph relative in England several months after her death, and for a notion of his paying a clergyman for conducting her funeral, Miss Jefferson is absent from the surviving written record of her son's life. Oh, that sucks. I wonder if they didn't have like that close of a relationship, and maybe that's why he didn't write a lot about her. I don't know. Write more about your mama. Letters between the two burned in the Shadwell fire of 1770. Oh, maybe that's why. And Jefferson apparently destroyed any subsequent correspondence. Why? Generations of biographers have speculated that Jefferson and his mother were somehow estranged. Yet Jefferson chose to live in proximity to her for many of the 19 years that she survived her husband, long into Jefferson's adulthood. Miss Jefferson did not die until 1776, the year her son, at age 33, authored the Declaration of Independence. Wow, at least she got to see her son, work on the independence, right? It was a chaotic time, right? But at least she got to see her son, rise to the ranks. Jefferson made his home at Shadwell while he was away at school and during his early years of law practice. The first was to be expected, but to have headquartered himself after college as a young lawyer in what he called my mother's house is a sign that things between them were not hopelessly hostile, and may have not been hostile at all. He did not move to Monticello, his little mountain, calls it his little mountain, until November 1770, when the Shadwell fire upended the family's domestic arrangements. The rebuilt house at Shadwell would be much smaller than the original. Well, at least they were blessed to be able to rebuild the house at Shadwell, right? Must have been really hard to put out fires back then. More so than now, because you have giant trucks. So, declaration, help authored. Okay. Interesting. I wonder why, maybe he didn't want people to know his relationship with his mom. I don't know. Maybe there was very personal letters, right? That he didn't want to come out and make him look weak or something. Fortifying our minds against the attack of calamities and misfortunes. Very solid advice from Thomas Jefferson. He definitely had to do that while, taking on the British. What do you think, family?